Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start today's debate by a quote from the great Russian author Leo Tolstoy. Wrong does not cease to be wrong because the majority share in it. Today, my name is Heba Megahed, and today I'll be your Prime Minister, and I'll show you why human rights laws are incompatible with majoritarian democracy. Now let's start by why they are incompatible by the basis of the law, why the majority will always choose their own wishes before the rights of the majority, and why the uninformed are incapable of making good choices when it comes to passing the human rights laws. Now let's start by defining our motion for today. What are human rights laws? They are laws which are enforced through the executive branch of the government, executing the basic rights given to all people as stated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Majoritarian democracy is a system where legislations are passed by elected representatives in the parliament, which are chosen by a majority of votes, a simple majority nonetheless. And passing of new laws that infringe the rights is prohibited through the higher authority of court when it comes to choosing human rights. Now, when the Supreme Court declares unconstitutional a legislation, it thwarts the will of the representatives of the actual people of the here and now in the Parliament or in the House of Commons. And it exercises this not on behalf of the prevailing majority, but against it, in a major contradiction to the pillars of majoritarian democracy, where the choice of the people is above all, even above basic human rights. Human rights laws give more weight to the voice of courts, which are a minority, over the voice of the majority. Majoritarian democracies, by definition, are dismissing all the voices of minorities at the domination of the choice of majorities and their own interest above all, at the expense of minorities, as I said, in a tyranny of majorities that is incompatible with human rights laws, which at essence requires supervision from a select few in the Supreme Court or in a court of justice, where they will be superior to the will of people, directly being at odds with the core values of majoritarian democracies. For example, was one of the main reasons that the UK has chosen to leave the European Union, where the human rights law declared by the European Union gave sovereignty to European courts over the voice of the majority of British people presented through the Parliament. Let me move on to the next point, where the majority are never going to choose the voice and the rights of the minority. For example, in California in 2009, voters banned gay marriage in a direct contradiction to Article 15 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that people have the right to choose who they marry. And a prime example of the tyranny of the majority, supported by majoritarian democratic values. If there was no system of checks in the USA, which is a consensus democracy, the authority of the court would not be able to overrule this and to not be able to protect the rights of minorities. This would never be the case in a majoritarian democracy, where the majority could very easily thwart the rights of the minorities. Ladies and gentlemen, in France, the secular majority stopped the passing of laws regarding freedom of expression and religious rights. This is because, again, the majoritarian nature of the French system and voting system are at odds with human laws, with human rights laws. When given the choice, majorities choose their own wishes over the rights of the minorities, as I have said and shown in the case of the French court. David, during a psychologist at Cornell University, said that incompetent people are inherently unable to judge the competence of other people, and it's very difficult for people to identify candidates or policies that are better due to the lack of the mentality and the tools needed to make such judgment. This makes majoritarian democracy unable to independently choose and pass laws regarding human rights, which makes the superior will of the people a representative of incompetence, of unfairness against human rights. For example, the elected US President Donald Trump stopped the right of movement of a certain minority of Arab ethnic background into the US, which did not pass. Why? Because the US is a consensus, and the Supreme Court overruled his judgment, despite him being the voice of the elective majorities. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have shown you why majoritarian democracy is simply incompatible when it comes to the passing of human rights laws. And of course, my partner will show you further demonstrations. Ladies and gentlemen, in matters of conscience, the law of majority has no place. Thank you very much.